Hey YouTube, I'm Vince White. Today we're talking about the John Deere employees who took a stand, fought John Deere. 90% of them stood together, voted down, voted down a contract that their union leadership told them to take. Now, something to note here: their union UAW is like a garbage union, and I don't mean it's for like sanitation workers or garbage people. I mean that it, as I understand it, they don't even vote for their own leadership in the union. It's run top down. I think the last two leaders are actually in jail, and they tell these constituents, these members of the union, this is who your leaders are. You don't get a say. Here's what we're doing. Here's the contract. Ratify. So what you had was you had the workers for John Deere. 90% of them said, not gonna do it. And here's why. And this is really interesting. I mean, there's a couple reasons why, but one of them was they were splitting the pension up into three tiers, and the current workers of John Deere were going to get a fairly good deal, but everybody who got hired in the future, no pension, just going to get a 401k. And the current workers at John Deere said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to play the new hires of the future dirty. We want them to get a good deal too. And so they fought. Now, in part, I think they fought because they've learned not to trust their union leadership, rightfully so. Again, their union is run by bad humans who do bad things. Or was. May still be, but definitely was. So that's beautiful. It was amazing. I was so excited for them. I'm going to post a video leading up to whether or not they're going to strike, a video from the Hill talking about their decision to vote against the deal, and then another piece down below in the doobie-doo about their actual strike and what's going on. Now here's a couple problems that they're going to face. The Biden administration is not friendly to unions. Which is odd because unions got the Biden administration elected. You could argue that two groups got the Biden administration elected, African Americans and union members. I would further argue he may not be a very grateful man based on his behaviors towards those two groups. Now, we don't have to get into him refusing to call back Black Lives Matter, except we just did. So that's not great. It's not great to have an aggressive anti-union president who, says the right thing, but maybe doesn't do it, in place while you're flirting, right? I got my black eye. Like a real old school union guy, right? So not ideal. Also, what's going on is the way they're running the government now. Big corporations get fat checks for nothing from the federal government. Well, that really increases your ability to withstand a strike, doesn't it? Worker shutdowns, not so concerning when you're getting big checks from Uncle Sam. So that's another thing going on. The last thing that's going on, and perhaps the most complex, and the thing that people are not talking about, most pensions are not indexed for inflation. Stop and think about that. Right now, our country is experiencing inflation so serious that we can't really calculate it any longer. And it's pretty clear from economists that the number the federal government is putting to the inflation is just pure fiction. Pure fiction, right? And I understand why it's difficult to calculate inflation. And I understand that we keep changing the process by which we calculate inflation, in part because we want inflation to look lower. I get all that. But here's the thing. The reality of the situation is, if you have a pension that is not indexed for inflation, and inflation is very bad, then your pension is going to be substantially less valuable than you thought it would. Now I'll go a step further. If you have, and let me explain. If your pension is not indexed for inflation, it means your pension is your pension. You receive X amount of dollars, completely ignoring what that dollar was worth when you secured your pension and what it's worth today, the day you receive it, right? So I got a great uncle. My grandfather always talked about him. He was a fire chief, fire captain, something like that. And he had this pension that was indexed for inflation. I think he had a couple. I think he might have also been a military officer. And you can tell I'm getting the story secondhand here. But I know, key fact, pensions indexed for inflation. So every year, when the US dollar gets devalued, his pension goes up. Because you need to get the same amount of buying power from your pension, not the same dollar count, right? It's not the same thing. 20 months ago, I could go buy a ribeye for $12. Right now, in a grocery store, I'd be likely to get it for $22. And not for nothing, I saw 4 bone-in ribeyes selling for $495 recently. Does that mean that inflation is 400x? No, clearly not. Does it mean that staples like food are experiencing inflation at concerning rates? Yes, clearly. And yeah, I get it. There's issues with the supply chain, and that can be driving inflation. But you gotta keep an eye on this. I've made videos about it before. I made it about it for your salary, your wages, right? You got to be able to earn. It's pretty much a consensus at this point that everybody who just got bumped to $15 minimum wage, it wasn't a bump. Listen to me. Understand this. When the minimum wage was $7.25, odds are you could buy more food with that $7.25 than maybe you can buy today with $15 an hour. That $15 that you get for 1 hour. Think about that. Many economists are saying the leap from $7.25 per hour as the minimum wage to 15 was not a bump because the 15 may now have less buying power than the old minimum wage would have had. Are you terrified? You should be. That's terrifying. Now, let's think about this a little further. We already know. Pension not indexed for inflation, hurt very bad by inflation. Pension that is indexed for inflation, hurt less bad by inflation. But wait, there's more. There's a metric, right? So if you're indexed for inflation, they can go get the number for inflation and use that number, provided generally by the government, to calculate how much your pension must go up. Where the government no longer agrees on how to calculate inflation, or where the government keeps repetitively changing how to calculate inflation, perhaps for political goals or to avoid panic in the streets, then there's a good chance, even though your pension is indexed for inflation, it's indexed for an artificially low amount of inflation. A number that's been selected for political reasons. To show you, it's not so bad. It's fine. We're doing fine. Don't be afraid. You're not going to starve to death. Except maybe you will. Because they're not giving real numbers. And the cost of food is going up. And your paycheck is buying less food. And God help all of us who have to pay to heat our homes this winter. Because there's a legit heating oil and propane crisis. It's real. You know it's real because Beirut and Lebanon have been dark, right? They've been in a blackout for days. China, which arguably one of the 3 most powerful countries in the world, is doing a rolling blackout, shutting down like a third of its factories at a time because it's experiencing an energy crisis. Yes! Right. This is not, like, we're not talking about, like, some country that's the pits of despair. Just trying to stay, people just trying to stay alive, clinging to life. We're talking about China. Right? We're wrestling for control of the world with China right now. And they're having troubles keeping the lights on, the heat on. That is coming for us. I sound like a crazy, but this is real. So when you're fighting about pensions, you need to keep in mind, well, what's that pension actually going to be worth? Right? When the government does things like print free money and they create inflation, what they're doing is they're making them dollars in your pension or in your bank account or in your wallet worth less. So why are you fighting for a pension when fundamentally the whole fiscal system you're living in is being run by people who tell you that $1 trillion spending bills will cost nothing because they can print the money? What they're really saying is, well, you can just steal that money through inflation from your wallet by printing new money. So, while I applaud John Deere, I think we need to keep in mind what currently the government is doing to the middle and lower class earners of our nation. Because workers can't unite and fight the good fight if they're starving. We know this. It's tough to mount a resistance from the breadline. It just is. We're Americans. We're not going to be good at being hungry. I know I'm not. Like and subscribe. It helps me to help more people just like you. And comment down below. Tell me I'm wrong. I would like to be wrong. I would desperately like to be wrong.